Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the rise, fall, and future of 23andMe's DNA database. Now, I want you to imagine for a second that it's a decade ago. You just got this small, sleek box in the mail. You spit into a plastic tube, seal it up, drop it in a mailbox, and eagerly wait to unlock the hidden secrets of your ancestry and your health. Millions of us did this, right? We were totally captivated by the sheer novelty of personal genetics. But today, we're unpacking a truly unprecedented situation, the complex legal and ethical predicament created by the 2025 bankruptcy of 23andMe. You see, this isn't your standard story about a business going under. It's about what happens to literally the most intimate data imaginable when the corporate entity holding it suddenly collapses. 12 million. Let that number sink in. Over 12 million everyday human beings swabbed their cheeks, mailed in their kits, and handed over their complete genetic blueprints. To put that into perspective, we're talking about a biological database larger than the populations of entire countries. By swabbing and sending, those 12 million individuals unknowingly created this massive, completely unprecedented data pool that suddenly found itself at major risk in the middle of a corporate restructuring. The sheer massive scale of this catalog is exactly what makes the subsequent fallout so incredibly high stakes. Section 1. The Promise of Personal DNA. To really understand what's at stake here, we first need to look at how 23andMe convinced millions of people that their DNA was meant to be shared in the first place. Back in 2006, 23andMe launched as this highly optimistic Silicon Valley startup. They famously threw these spitting parties to make DNA collection trendy and accessible, and they even landed a $3.9 million Series A investment from Google. Things escalated, and by 2021, they hit an absolute peak, going public with a massive $3.5 billion valuation. But then, the tide turned, and it turned hard. In 2023, the company suffered a massive data breach. Hackers compromised the personal info of nearly 7 million users, which completely shattered consumer trust, literally overnight. That catastrophic loss of faith, combined with mounting financial struggles, ultimately culminated in a Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing in 2025. It's wild. They went from a beloved utopian science project to a distressed financial asset in less than 2 decades. Now, you have to remember that 23andMe didn't just sell you a map to find your distant cousins. They sold consumers on a powerful, noble promise. Their pitch was, quote, "You can help fuel scientific discovery just by answering questions." They recruited users into this grand narrative of crowdsourced science. When people opted in, they felt like they were actively contributing to the fight against inherited conditions and diseases. They were made to feel like they were part of something much bigger than themselves, actually contributing to the greater good of humanity's medical future. Section 2. Crowdsourcing the human genome. Let's take a look at how this promise built a completely new form of biomedical research participation. Through a highly user-friendly interface, which was totally different from those dense, intimidating clinical reports of the past, users were invited to voluntarily opt in. And they didn't just share DNA. They voluntarily offered up survey responses, self-reported demographics, phenotypic data, and even microbiome data. And that phenotypic data, it is incredibly detailed. It includes everything from whether you have a cleft chin or if you sneeze when you step into bright sunlight, all the way to your sleep patterns and your family history of chronic illness. All of these deeply personal, multidimensional data points were systematically collected for the sake of scientific advancement without users getting a single dime in financial compensation. But here's the thing. This consented data wasn't just sitting idle in a vault somewhere. It actually worked. It successfully fueled between 258 and 276 independent scientific publications. To give you an idea of the real-world impact here, 23andMe's database was instrumental in discovering new genetic links to conditions like depression, asthma, and even Parkinson's disease. Researchers across the globe relied on this massive trove of genetic info to accelerate their studies. It essentially became this multi-use engine for widespread biomedical research, completely validating that optimistic promise made to the millions of everyday consumers who opted in. Section 3. The Fall into Bankruptcy. So, with all that success, we have to examine how this scientific powerhouse ended up hitting a brick wall. On March 23, 2025, 23andMe initiated a voluntary Chapter 11 bankruptcy process. And honestly, it was the result of a perfect storm. First off, their business model had a fatal flaw.
Once a customer takes a DNA test, they rarely need to buy another one, so repeat business was severely lacking. Second, the company pivoted heavily into in-house drug discovery, which is notoriously expensive and just burns through cash at an incredible rate. Add in the devastating fallout and the massive legal costs from that 2023 data breach, and, well, the company simply ran out of money. Chapter 11 means its remaining assets, most notably that massive genetic database, would be sold off under court supervision to maximize the financial return for stakeholders.
Section 4, the billion-dollar bidding war. That financial collapse immediately triggered a high-stakes auction for the company's absolute most valuable asset. Two major players emerged in this financial tug-of-war. The biopharmaceutical giant Regeneron placed an initial bid of $256 million. But they were ultimately outbid by the Tetam Research Institute, which threw down a winning bid of $305 million. Now, what makes this specific detail so incredibly fascinating is the buyer itself. Tetam is a newly established nonprofit foundation led by none other than 23andMe's own founder and former CEO, Anne Wojcicki. So we essentially saw a founder scrambling to buy back the very genetic database she helped build, outbidding a massive pharmaceutical corporation in the process. Section 5, the threat of corporate enclosure. This bidding war really raised some serious alarms among academic researchers about the potential fate of this crowdsourced data. Which brings us to a vital concept we need to talk about: corporate enclosure. This basically means confining shared scientific data to a single company for its own commercial research, which drastically reduces the overall public benefit. Think about it. When genetic data is open, universities and independent researchers worldwide can collaborate to find breakthroughs. But under corporate enclosure, a single buyer hoards the database for private commercial targets. The optimistic promise of fueling scientific discovery for the world suddenly clashes directly with a model where your DNA is locked behind closed corporate doors to develop highly profitable exclusive drugs. This step-by-step breakdown shows exactly how public-minded data donation can legally be transformed into an enclosed corporate asset. Step 1. Consumers willingly donate their data for broad public discovery. Step 2. The corporate entity holding that data goes bankrupt. Step 3. A purchaser acquires the data free and clear during the bankruptcy sale. Let's actually pause on that phrase for a second. In U.S. bankruptcy law, free and clear is a uniquely powerful mechanism. It means the new buyer gets the asset wiped completely clean of the legal baggage, the encumbrances, and sometimes even the specific user agreements of the previous owner. The new owner basically gets a fresh slate, while the original data donors might just be left with a broken promise. Section 6. Who inherits your DNA? And this brings us to the ultimate tension of this entire explainer: the clash between consumer intent and corporate law. So on one side, we have the U.S. Bankruptcy Code, which is a rigid legal framework explicitly designed to favor free and clear asset transfers to maximize financial value and pay back creditors. But on the other side, we have donor intent, the specific public-facing promises made to the millions of people who handed over their genetic information under the steadfast belief that they were advancing global science, not just boosting some future buyer's bottom line. The absolute crux of the dilemma here is whether a bankruptcy court can legally force a new owner to honor those original privacy policies and user agreements, or if human DNA is ultimately going to be treated just like any other piece of liquidated property, like office furniture. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to ponder about your own digital and biological footprint in our modern corporate landscape. When consumer protections clash with bankruptcy law, what is the ultimate fate of your genetic blueprint? As our most intimate data becomes more and more intertwined with corporate entities, this is a question every single one of us needs to be asking. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.